Bumpkin, you cultured bumpkins. And today we have Carrie Hoover, who I found on, maybe I found you on TikTok first, but, but
You Nobody watches me on TikTok. I'm
I
so
mean,
flattered.
I actually don't remember which came first, the TikTok or the YouTube, but I follow you both places.
Oh,
And
thank
if
you.
you're watching or listening, you should too. But I love your channel. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, for sure. It was actually my one of my sister's ideas, who is a teacher, come from a family of public school teachers. And one day she mentioned to me, just kind of, I don't know if she meant it or not, but she's like, "Well, you have a lot of video experience. You should do something like Spark Notes, kind of, but for YouTube, and have it like less academic, just more chill." And I was like, I should do that. That actually sounds like a great idea. And so I went for it, not knowing anything about YouTube. And those first few videos, I'm sure you've been there. You're like, oh man, is that really how I sound to everyone around me? Like, how do I have friends?
the I definitely know. Me, it's with the video. So because I'm a voice actor, by my trade or whatever.
For
So
sure.
when I first started that, it was like, oh my gosh, is that what everybody hears? I can't believe it. Well, now I'm used to it. But the being on video, the face is where it's like, am I a statue?
Yes.
Michelangelo carved this because I haven't made a peep with my face. And so anyway, that's really cool. Are you a teacher? What's your background? How do you what's your interest? How did you get into this?
Yeah, I was kind of from all over the place. I'm not a teacher. I ended up started out as a theater major. I don't know if you had any theater
A little bit.
in the background there. I figured you did. So started out as a theater major and ended up finishing out as a double major in radio, TV, film, and English.
Okay.
Yeah, did a ton of like, I don't know if I'm assuming you're kind of like, are you a rural small town like
Yes.
me?
Yes.
Like, I think we have that
Definitely.
in common. Yeah. So did a lot of like the small town community theater, which like all the goofy, embarrassing stories that you've ever heard are 100% true. I'm so glad that smartphones were not a thing when I was growing up, because I don't want to know. I can only, I can only imagine. Only imagine the worst. So I had some theater growing up. Did a little bit in college. And then after college, again, by someone's mistake, because I was trying to join the PR department as an AFI intern, and my resume got sent to the press department instead. And so one of the festival press directors, it was AFI Dallas at the time, they contacted me and were like, "Oh, we see you wanted to do like red carpet stuff. So we figured we'd go ahead and give you a shot because you're a student." I'm like, okay, okay.
That would be like talking to actors and producers as they like in a live setting, all
Yes,
that stuff. Oh, mm.
as they walk by having their pictures taken, which I had never done, had no clue about. But I ended up doing that for a good number of Texas independent film festivals, met a lot of fun people, had a really, really good time. And yeah, so it kind of came from that. Probably like a lot of actors, I'm assuming with you, like literature is the first love.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was where my sister, one of the many teachers in my family, kind of came with like, well, why don't you take like the books, the stories, the thing that first drew you to theater and film in the first place, and combine that with the fact that you've been doing a little bit of live video and just see what you can come up with. And yeah, spoiler alert, very different from being like in front of the camera with the microphone versus like trying to fool with the camera and the mic and figure out what you're doing and how to make it fit together. Yeah, I did not have the appreciation for the editors that I should have. Definitely.
Live stuff like that is the scariest. If it's prepared remarks, public speaking, I'm okay. Maybe even a little bit like, tell us about yourself. Well, that's not prepared, but I'm an expert on myself. So, I could do that. But when I'm supposed to be entertaining and like get you to be entertaining, oh gosh, that is, that's tough.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And some of the I've been was very lucky when I was doing that to occasionally get to talk to a very big name actor or director. And a lot of them, they've got their media personality that they put forward and you don't have to do much work. And then there are some people that have done 200 of these already and they're so tired and so bored and you're trying to come up with something charming to say that would make it less painful for them and yeah.
That, well, I think you've found your niche. This is, I mean, I love what you're doing because, like I said, when I want to know where a story's going, if I'm like, okay, let's say The Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe was one of them. I was like, actually, I don't know if I've ever read that. Let me see where this is going. So I get on there. Okay, here's where this is going. Here's what it's about. That kind of thing. I just think that's great, and I think you're not only is it entertaining, but for anybody that's a teacher or a student that is trying to, work on an assignment, you're a gold mine.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you saying that. I've gotten on a couple times on YouTube, I've gotten a comment from sometimes a parent or sometimes a student saying, like, hey, I am ESL and I've been trying to help my son with his high school English homework, but coming from, if English is not your first language, that's so difficult. And for someone to say, like, this has been really helpful for me, for you to explain, like, why this word was used or what this idiom means, I was like, oh, yay.
Right.
You.
That is, yeah. I love your channel for that reason, and I think everybody needs to check it out. So Mariah's in there. She said The Black Cat is one of my favorites. Okay, so Mariah, what you ought to do is go to Carrie's YouTube. Is it at Carrie Hoover? Is that it?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
okay.
just
It's in I put a link in the description. But anyway, definitely check out her stuff. It's really good. So today we're going to do something a little different, being that we have a theater and presenter with a red carpet presenter with us.
I'm way overselling it. You're gonna be so
But we're gonna do a duet, like a live duet with O. Henry's The Gift of the Magi. It's Christmas time. It'll be good. But before we do the performance, could you maybe give us a little tell us what it's about? It doesn't have to be much, just whatever. What's the story about?
Sure. Well, I'll try to do it spoiler free if you guys have not read it before. So this is by O. Henry, not his real name. William Sidney Porter, I think, was his real name. Spent some time in Texas. So what up, William Sidney Porter? Where are you from, by the way?
Mississippi.
That's what I thought. I was like,
Right.
Sure, Mississippi. I heard him say Ole Miss at some point, but I wasn't sure. Yeah, so he spent some time down in our little belt of the country. And so this story takes place in the early 1900s in New York City. And we have Jim and Della, young married couple who have fallen on some hard times. And so it is Christmas time, has come to New York. It's cold, obviously. And the family, or the couple, I should say, have pretty recently had a huge reduction in their income. They've lost about a third of their income, which kind of makes this like super relevant for us, Americans in the 2010s and 2020s. So many people fell on these like suddenly very hard times, and trying to carry on, trying to carry on like normal, trying to carry on smiling, especially like I don't have children myself, but for people that have kids in the house, trying to go into the holidays with like everything's great, and trying to put a good face on a really difficult situation. So Jim and Della both have the idea that they are going to get this amazing Christmas present for their spouse, and it doesn't quite go as planned.
Okay, good deal. I like this. I love how O. Henry, he's such an amazing storyteller. He has a huge vocabulary.
Yeah,
Um,
yes. Oh my gosh. I have
and
a little panic about that. I'm like, oh gosh, I think I know how to say this, but I'm pretty sure I've never used it in a sentence.
I have a exactly. I have a rule about reading O. Henry, and that is when you come to a word, just read it confidently. So, so I'm sure if you listen to my narrations, if there's words in there like that is not how you say that. But he was confident, and I respect it. So that's what we'll do with this one. This one actually doesn't have a lot of big words, I don't think, as much as some of the other ones. But anyway,
I'll find them, or fall over the little ones that should be very obvious and easy. So we'll see.
all right. So this is on YouTube, but obviously this is going to be on Apple and Spotify as well. So so the duet, we're about to kick this off, and it's going to be if you're on YouTube, you'll hear it live with mistakes. If you get it to the what do you call it? If you're hearing on Apple, it'll sound more like an audio book. I'll cut any mistakes out, but either way, it'll be fun. So you want to kick us off?
Let's go for it. The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. $1.87. That was all. And 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealing implied. 3 times Della counted it. $1.87. And the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do but flop down on the shabby little couch and howl. So Della did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. While the mistress of the home is gradually subsiding from the first stage to the second, take a look at the home. A furnished flat at $8 per week. It did not exactly beggar description, but it certainly had that word on the lookout for the mendicancy squad. In the vestibule below was a letterbox into which no letter would go, and an electric button from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. And also appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham had been flung to the breeze during a former period of prosperity when its possessor was being paid $30 per week. Now, when the income was shrunk to $20, the letters of Dillingham looked blurred, as though they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and unassuming D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim, and greatly hugged by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Della, which is all very good. Della finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with the powder rag. She stood by the window and looked out dully at a gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a present. She'd been saving every penny she could for months with this result. $20 a week doesn't go far, Expenses had been greater than she had calculated. They always are. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim. Her Jim. Many a happy hour she had spent planning for something nice for him, something fine and rare and sterling, something just a little bit near to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. There was a pier glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you've seen a pier glass in an $8 flat. A very thin and very agile person may, by observing his reflection in a rapid sequence of longitudinal strips, obtain a fairly accurate conception of his looks. Della, being slender, had mastered the art. Suddenly she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly, but her face had lost its color within 20 seconds. Rapidly, she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Now, there were two possessions of the James Dillingham Youngs in which they both took a mighty pride. One was Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in the flat across the air shaft, Della would have let her hair hang out the window someday to dry just to depreciate Her Majesty's jewels and gifts. Had King Solomon been the janitor with all his treasures piled up in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed just to see him pluck at his beard from envy. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters. It reached below her knee. It reached below her knee and made itself almost a garment for her. And then she did it up again, nervously and quickly. Once she faltered for a minute and stood still while a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. On went her old brown jacket. On went her old brown hat. With a whirl of skirts and with the brilliant sparkle still in her eyes, she fluttered out the door and down the stairs to the street. Where she stopped, the sign read, Madame Sofronie, hair goods of all kinds. One flight up Della ran and collected herself, panting. Madame, large, too white, chilly, hardly looked the Sofronie. Will you buy my hair? Asked Della. I buy hair, said Madame. Take your hat off and let's have a look at the sight of it. Take your hat off and let's have a sight at the looks of it. Down rippled the brown cascade. $20, said Madame, lifting the mass with a practiced hand. Give it to me quick, said Della. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped by on rosy wings. Forget the hashed metaphor. She was ransacking the stores for Jim's present. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, properly proclaiming its value by substance alone, and not by meretricious ornamentation, as all good things should do. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him. Quietness and value. The description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it, and she hurried home with the 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly on account of the old leather strap that he used in place of a chain. When Della reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas. and went to work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love, which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny, close lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long, carefully, and critically. If Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself, before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what could I do? What could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made, and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops.
Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat on the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. Then she heard his step on the stairway down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit of saying little silent prayers about the simplest everyday things, and now she whispered,
Please, God, make him think I'm still pretty.
The door opened, and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow. He was only 22, and to be burdened with a family. He needed a new overcoat, and he was without gloves. Jim stepped inside the door as immovable as a setter at the scent of quail. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that she had prepared for. He simply stared at her, fixedly, with that peculiar expression on his face. Della wriggled off the table and went for him.
Jim, darling, she cried, don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold it because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you.
You've cut off your hair? Asked Jim laboriously, as if he had not arrived at that patent fact yet, even after the hardest mental labor.
Cut it off and sold it, said Della. Don't you like me just as well, anyhow? I'm me without my hair, ain't I?
Jim looked about the room curiously. You say your hair's gone, he said, with an air almost of idiocy.
You needn't look for it, said Della. It's sold, I tell you, sold and gone too. It's Christmas Eve, boy. Be good to me, for it went for you. Maybe the hairs of my head were numbered, she went on with sudden serious sweetness. But nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on, Jim?
Out of his trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. He enfolded his Della. For 10 seconds, let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in the other direction. $8 a week or $1 million a year. What's the difference? A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. This dark assertion will be illuminated later on. Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it upon the table.
Go ahead.
Sorry. See, this is the part in the podcast on Apple that'll be cut off and thrown upon the cutting room floor. Don't make any mistake, Del, he said, about me. I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that could make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going a while at first. White fingers and white fingers and nimble. What does yours say? Because this has several. Are you looking at the same one I am, or are you? Okay, so I saw you fix about three or four typos from the other one.
I jumped back. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna. Okay, white fingers tore at the string and paper, and there was an ecstatic scream of joy, and then, alas, a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment of all the comforting powers of the lord of the flat. For there lay the set of combs, side and back, that Della had worshipped in the broad, excuse me, that Della had worshipped for so long in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure tortoiseshell with jeweled rims, just the shade to wear in the beautiful vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession. And now they were hers. But the tresses that should have adorned the coveted adornments were gone. But she hugged them to her bosom, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and say,
My hair grows so fast, Jim. And then Della leapt up like a little singed cat and cried, Oh, oh.
Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. The dull, precious metal seemed to flash with a reflection of her bright and ardent spirit.
Isn't it a dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at your watch 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it.
Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. Dell, he said, let's put our Christmas presents away and keep them a while. They're too nice to use just at present. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs, and now suppose you put the chops on. The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in case of duplication. And here I've lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of two foolish children in a flat who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in a last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Of all who give and receive gifts, such as they are wisest. Everywhere they are wisest. They are the Magi. Yay! All right, that was a lot of fun.
It was. I was telling Jake before this, I'm just testing out the new microphone today, and I'm not far from an airport, and I kept having somebody, I swear, was doing like circles above my building, and I kept stopping like, can he hear this? Oh my God.
It'll be. I live near. Thank you, Mariah, for the applause. The crowd went wild. Yeah. I live near an airbase and an airport, and then there's a helicopter plant that does. We're right in the test pattern, so it's kind of like I get a lot of airplanes, so no big deal.
Yeah,
exactly. So that was a lot of fun. That was cool. And I'll edit out my mistake. I don't think you made any mistakes. Wow, that was impressive.
You can edit out my pet helicopters that are circling my head.
Yeah, in their little holding pattern for landing. Busy Saturday. So, well, thank you so much. That was I had so much fun with that, and tell people where they can find you, connect with you, consume your content, stuff like that.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. It was such an honor. I'm a big fan of, I found you on TikTok
Okay.
and doing Redneck Jane Austen, which, I'm from the Southwest and I do love me some Jane Austen
Right.
and some Shakespeare. So I was like, perfect. So yes, big honor to be asked. I really, really appreciate it. So you can find me on YouTube. It's just my name, Carrie Hoover. It's the same on TikTok. I think it's Carrie underscore Hoover is my handle on TikTok. But yeah, I am always trying to ferret out whatever people would be reading in high school or in your basic college English classes, trying to push those to the forefront to try and help some people. And it's fun because some people jump in who have studied literature in different parts of the world, and I get some people correcting me with like, actually that means such and such, you are way off base. I'm like, oh well, we converse with each other, this is how we learn these things.
Right.
So yeah, I would love it for everyone to come join.
So if somebody were to say, oh, next year I'm teaching, I know like a lot of homeschool parents look at my stuff. So I think this is perfect for someone like, let's say a parent that's educating their kids, but maybe they don't have an education background and they're trying to, expand their curriculum and stuff. I mean, it carries, you have to follow Carrie. She really has some great stuff. But if someone were to say, next year we're doing whatever, can they leave a comment and you might think about doing that one if you haven't?
Absolutely. I love that. Of course, I do. I mean, you know how it is. I have a day job, so as much time as I'd like to spend, I don't get to cover quite as much as I would like to. I do try and focus on the stuff that is pretty front and center, like on TikTok right now. This won't, I'll be past it in a few weeks, but right now I'm covering the Great Gatsby. The very first novella I covered was Animal Farm by George Orwell. So I try to get a hold of the stuff that, like, okay, a lot of people are going to be asking about that. But I have had some requests recently for Frankenstein. I've had a request for Fahrenheit 451.
Okay.
And then I've had requests for like some completely obscure stuff that I'm kind of like, what school do you go to that you are reading this?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I try to go for the right now, trying to go for the pretty mainline stuff that a lot of people cover.
Good deal. Well, that's great. And you do a great job. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on today. And yeah, make sure if you're listening, whether you're watching, catching the replay, or you're listening on Spotify, Apple, go to Carrie's YouTube, subscribe, and consume her content. You'll learn a lot.
Well, no, everybody come see Jake's content, some redneck Pride and Prejudice, like from someone who is, I'm sure not nearly the acting training that you have. But like I enjoy it when people make a conscious pivot from, we talked about the given circumstances, like a conscious pivot from that to try and shed a different light on the material, like, show a different meaning behind it. And like, yeah, bringing your own accent and your own contemporary context in is so important to that kind of work. So I really appreciate that. Plus I'm like, yes, redneck Mr. Collins. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Every single day.
I'm glad you like him. Good deal. Well, again, thank you so much. And yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll catch you next time.